I was raised under the protective auspices, so to speak, of the Christian Church. When I was 12 or so, my mother enrolled me in confirmation classes, which served as introduction to adult membership in the church. I did not like attending. Religion was for the ignorant, weak, and superstitious. I stopped attending church and joined the modern world. I'm not an atheist anymore because I don't look at the world that way anymore. I'm not a materialist anymore. I don't think the world's made out of matter. I think it's made out of what matters. It's made out of meaning. I'm a scientist, but I would say I'm also a religious person. I'm a deeply religious person. And
how do you reconcile those?
Yeah. Exactly. Well, that's that. And I've spent 40 years thinking about that. And for 20 of those years, I did almost nothing but think about that all the time. And I realized something, partly from reading Carl Jung. And what I realized was that even the fundamentalists have the wrong idea about religious truth. Religious truth is not scientific truth, like the stories in Genesis, which are very old stories, maybe tens of thousands of years old. They're obviously not scientific theories because the people who wrote them weren't scientists. We didn't have science until about 500 years ago. So the idea that the stories in Genesis are scientific theories is just false on every possible front. And so then you might say, well, there's no other truth but scientific truth. It's like, well, wait a minute. That's not true. Because what scientific truth tells you is what things are. But genuine religious truth tells you how you should act. And those things are not the same. And I don't go to church. And the reason I don't go to church is because, well, it drives me crazy, to speak frankly. I haven't been able to sit in a situation like that ever since I was, well, ever, really. That's really the truth of it. Ever. I'm not convinced that that's a good thing, because I do believe, and I've had good conversations about this with Jonathan Pageau, I do believe that communal return to the source of the community's ethics is actually a necessary thing. And maybe I'm atoning for my past sins by doing these biblical lectures at the moment, which is something that's communal. So, and then because there's also something about going where a bunch of other people are to reaffirm your commitment to the good that you're all aiming at, that's got some power in it. And I don't think that that's something that we should forego. I think it's dangerous. I mean, look, even if you're cynical about church, and I guess I would put myself in that category, it's certainly the case that communal church going in the 1950s, say, provided the average person with at least an hour a week where they were contemplating, no matter how poorly, the purpose of ethics in life and the idea of a higher purpose and a higher meaning in life. And you got to think that spending an hour a week thinking about that is better than never doing it at all. So I don't know how that tradition can be revivified in a meaningful way, but I really do think it's a catastrophe that we've lost it, because we don't have a center, an ethical center that holds our community together, and the consequence of that is that we're fragmenting quite badly. So people often ask me, do you believe in God? Which I don't like that question. First of all, it's an attempt to box me in a sense. And the reason that it's an attempt to box me in is because the question is asked so that I can be firmly placed on one side of a binary argument. And the reason I don't like to answer it is because A, I don't like to be boxed in, and B, because I don't know what the person means by believe or God. And they think they know. And the probability that they construe belief and construe God the same way I do is virtually zero. So it's a question that doesn't work for me on multiple levels of analysis. But But strangely enough, just as we were talking, the answer to that question popped into my head. I act as if God exists. Now you can decide for yourself whether that means that I believe in him, so to speak. But I act as if he exists. So that's a good enough answer for that.
Why do people go to church? Right? Because that's what's going on.
And why should they?
Right.
Because that's a discussion. So Jonathan took me to an Orthodox ceremony in Seattle, and like I wasn't into it. I found it grated on me.
You're like a 10-year-old boy that we're telling to stop moving.
Yeah, that's right. So that was my Freudian fixations. Like, yeah, you're 10.
Stop wiggling.
Yeah, stop wiggling. Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. But, there's been a lot of water under the bridge since then, man. And I went to an Orthodox mass here a couple of weeks ago, and I found it and a Catholic one a week before that. I was down at Franciscan University, and I found it unbelievably soothing. I also did develop, and partly as a consequence of our discussions, a deeper appreciation for what was happening in the ritual itself, and also more tolerance for whatever inadequacies I might perceive, And partly that's also a realization, lots of modern people say, well, I don't go to church because I don't believe that. It's like, well, who cares what you believe? Like, who the hell are you anyways? Like, and why do you even care what you believe? And how's that working for you, this belief set that you theoretically have? How sophisticated is that? Like, are you Plato or what? It's like, well, here's the church and here's me and I'm right. It's like, well, no, you're not. And first, and second, you don't even want to be, because that's a great place to be, like pinnacle of brilliant wisdom. It's completely solipsistic. No tradition for me, thank you very much. I've got it all right in my head. And even if you are right that the bloody institution is chaotic and decadent in some fundamental sense, it's like, well, good, there's something for you to do, like there always has been throughout the entire history of mankind, because that's Osiris, right? The once great king who's fallen into disrepair. It's like, well, if the church is broken and you're the genius to see it, why don't you go fix it? Well, then you might say, well, we'll just abandon it. It's like, okay, well, fine. You're going to get rid of that, You're going to get rid of marriage. You're going to get rid of funerals. You're going to get rid of Christmas. You're going to get rid of any sense of sacred time. You're going to dispense with the whole history of what Judeo-Christian thought. You're going to dispense with the idea of the sacred nature of the individual. Like, how far are you willing to go with this? With regards to my connection to Orthodoxy, I have kind of a funny story to tell about that. About 15 years ago, a student of mine who I've maintained a relationship with since I taught at Harvard, I'd helped him through a difficult period. His family had been at the center of a real storm of publicity, like this, a front page story for a number of months. Recently, he returned the favor with me. But he proposed at one point that I fly down to Los Angeles and act as the officiant at his marriage. And I thought, that's pretty interesting. I never expected that to happen. And so I thought, well, if I'm going to do that, I better get ordained, because that's obviously the logical thing to do. And I thought, well, how do you get ordained on short notice? And obviously the answer to that is you go online. And so, so I went online and I signed up. I could name my church. So I did. I have this church. I'm the only member. It's called the Church of the Spirit of St. Joachim of Fiore, which, isn't necessarily the name that you would expect. I liked St. Joachim from what I knew of him, because he had this idea that there were three epochs. There would be three epochs in Western civilization, and one would be the epoch of the Father, and that's roughly the Old Testament epoch, the Old Testament morality that has to do with following rules. And then there was the epoch of the Son, and that was, of course, the Christian epoch of the last 2,000 years. And he believed that what would come after that would be the epoch of the Holy Ghost. And the Holy Ghost is this weird spirit thing that hypothetically Christ left behind, that could inhabit people and guide them on their path. And it seems to me that that's very much in keeping with the Orthodox idea that the proper moral pathway for each individual to take is to attempt to bear the burden of the perfect individual, right? To become Christ, so to speak, in an attempt to transcend mortality and finitude and to unite with God. And I thought, well, that was kind of a cool idea. So I thought, well, I might as well have that as a church. And then I thought, who should I be in this church? And I thought, well, Pope was probably a little bit on the narcissistic side, let's say. So I thought, I'll be metropolitan. Because I thought that was kind of archaic enough and sort of out of the way enough so that it was a good joke. So I'm my own metropolitan, my own church. It only has one rule, and so you can join it if you want. The rule is that if you're a member of my church, you can't follow stupid rules. Yeah, so that's a good rule, because it's an anti-rule, which is really funny as far as I'm concerned. Anyways, I went down to LA and I did marry these two, and they're still married, and so that's good. And yeah, so I know that's a bit rambly, but it's been a long day. I talked to Sam Harris today again, for those of you who, it went great. Yeah, it went great. Anyway, so look, the idea is pretty straightforward, as far as I can tell. There's this tremendous idea that's at the bottom of Western culture that's taken the human race millennia and perhaps an endless amount of time before then, an eternal amount of time before then to formulate. And the idea is that our consciousness, and that's the center of us, the soul, whatever that happens to be, partakes in the process by which creation comes into being. And we do that through the logos, which is our capacity to think and to utter words and to engage in dialogue, but more importantly, to do that truthfully. And that to the degree that we're able to do that truthfully, we bring paradise into being rather than hell. And it seems to me that that's as close to objective reality, although it's not precisely objective, it's more than objective reality. It's a kind of meta-reality. It's the most profound truth that you'll ever encounter.
Do you just tend to describe yourself as a religious man at all?
I would definitely describe myself as a religious man, yeah. I think that's fundamentally true. The devil's in the details, though. What does that mean exactly?
I've seen you being asked the question, do you believe in God? And that's not a question you necessarily find it terribly easy to answer.
Well, I don't know what people mean when they say believe. Like it's as if that question explains itself when it's asked. It's like it doesn't. What do you mean by believe? And what do you mean by God? And what makes you think that the question that I'm answering is the same one that you're asking? If this is not something that you can say yes or no to in any straightforward manner. So I find it an off-putting question. And I don't think it's because I'm avoiding the issue. I think that to answer it properly requires books and lectures. So,
do you see yourself at least in the Christian tradition as far as your, I suppose, worldview?
Well, there's no doubt about that because I'm a Westerner. There's no escape from that.
Yeah.
I'm conditioned in every cell as a consequence of the Judeo-Christian worldview.
I was wondering what your stance is on cultural Christianity. And by that I mean the expectation to go to church, to abide by Christian morals, things like that, without necessarily having a personal conviction or pursuing a personal relationship with God.
When I was a kid, I used to, 13 years old, let's say, I liked to be cynical about those who attended church, those people who were Christian 1 hour a week and then were ordinary sinners the rest of the time. And when I got substantially older, I realized that aiming upward toward the divine for 1 hour a week is a lot more than not doing it ever. Right, and then I would also say that to some degree everyone who's a Christian is a cultural Christian because nobody can manifest the full, depth of the faith in their own life, right? We all fall short of the glory of God, and so better a cultural Christian than nothing at all, you might say. And then also, doing a good thing badly is much better than not doing it at all. So, and maybe you start with practice and maybe you're not even committed to it, but you at least have the possibility that will grow. And so you don't want to be cynical about people's stumbling attempts to make their way uphill. And I would say that's even the case if you're culturally Christian merely to camouflage yourself properly in the cloak that your neighbors expect. At least then you're showing some sign of caring what other people think about what you do, which is part of the hallmark of being social.
It is, of course, completely presumptuous of me to dare to write and broadcast a video entitled Message to the Christian Churches, but I'm going to do it anyway because I have something to say and because that something needs to be said. We have our problems in the Christian church. We are moribund and sometimes, far too often, corrupt and sometimes deeply so. We are outdated, as are all institutions with their roots in the dead but still often wise past. So join us. We'll help fix you up, and you can help fix us up. And together, we'll aim up. And here's a message to those young men skeptical about such things. What else do you have? You can abandon the churches in your cynicism and disbelief. You can say to yourself, narcissistically and solipsistically, the church does not express what I believe properly. Who cares what you believe? Why is this about you? Do you even want it to be about you? What if it was about others? What if it was about your duty to the past and to the broader community that surrounds you in the present? What if it was incumbent upon you and vital to your health and willingness even to live, to rescue your dead father from the belly of the beast, where he has always resided, and to restore him to life? Once again, to the churches, Protestant, you're the worst at the moment. Catholic, Orthodox. Invite young men. Put up a billboard. Say, young men are welcome here. Print some flyers and put them in a box by the billboard. Signal the existence of those flyers with an arrow with the words, more information about attending here. Tell those who have never been in a church exactly what to do, how to dress, when to show up, who to contact, and most importantly, what they can do. Ask more, not less, of those you are inviting. Ask more of them than anyone ever has. Remind them who they are in the deepest sense and help them become that. Your churches, for God's sake. Quit fighting for social justice. Quit saving the bloody planet. Attend to some souls. That's what you're supposed to do. That's your holy duty. Do it now, before it's too late. And the hour is nigh.
How often do you go to church?
That's a good question. I don't attend church. And so you might think that makes me a hypocrite, and possibly it does. I would say I participate avidly in civic enterprises, however. You know, and for me, the lectures, that's a church for me. You know, I'm trying to make things better. And I think I'm participating with people, my audience members, my viewers and listeners. They're committed to making things better, and they're committed to, I hope, at least in some sense, they're committed to the truth. And so it's always been awkward for me to go to church because, for a variety of reasons, and some of that might just be the unwillingness to do it, but I find myself uncomfortable in them often because I always got the impression that the people who were reading the words didn't believe them.
Obviously, you don't want your view on religion summarized by it's good for stupid people.
Well, I do want it summarized to some degree that way because one of the things
yes,
we do.
I'm giving you the opportunity again to put this foot in your mouth.
But I would say not only. I mean, the thing is that we're all stupid, and some of us are far stupider than others.
But we're not. But we're not that stupid. I mean,
but there's another problem, Sam. I think, and this is obviously a contentious one. And one of the things I don't go to church, but there is one thing I admire about the church, and that is that it's managed to serve as a repository for these fundamental underlying fictions for 2 millennia. And that's really something bloody unbelievable. Then the question came to me, do I believe in God? And I don't like that question. And people have complained at me a lot, and I'm sure they have their reasons because they don't like my answers, you know, and I have two answers. They've kind of become stock, which is not a good thing. But they're the best approximate. I can't figure out why I don't like the question exactly. I had three sort of burgeoning hypotheses. One was, it's none of your damn business. That's the first one. So it's like a privacy issue. Like it seemed to me to be a question that was too private to be answered properly. And so, and you know, you could consider that a cop-out, and maybe it is. And then another one was, well, what do you mean by believe? Like, do you mean the words? Do you mean to say the words, I believe in God? Does that indicate that you believe in God? Like, I don't know what you mean by believe exactly, because...
Πιστεύω εις ένα Θεό, Πατέρα Παντοκράτορα, ποιητήν ουρανού και γη ορατών και πάντων και οράτων.
I act as if I believe in God, or to the best of my ability. And people aren't very happy with that either. And then the third is that I'm afraid that he might exist, which I think is the most comical of the three answers and perhaps the most accurate one.
I believe in one God, Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth, and of all things visible and invisible.
Not all those who say, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven. Got that about right? Which means something approximating, just because you make a claim to moral virtue, let's say, your belief in God, which I can't see how you can make a higher claim to moral virtue than that. You know,
Credo in unum Deum, omnipotentem, ad quodem celi et terrae, visibilium omnium, et invisibilium.
Because you got, and I think this is why it's bothered me to answer this question. It's like, what right do I have to say that? To make that claim, I believe in God. Well, what's the claim? Is that the claim that I'm a good person somehow? Because you'd think that if you believed in God, actually, like seriously, that you'd be a good person, like right now, because, well, for obvious reasons, I would think. And so if that hasn't happened in some sort of miraculous sense, so that you're the best person you could possibly imagine being on an ongoing basis, and terrified of deviating from that path in a serious manner, then I don't see why you have the right to say that you believe in God.
Let us confess our faith in the words of the Nicene Creed. We believe in one God, the Father of the Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, of all that is visible and invisible. We believe in one Lord Jesus Christ, the only begotten Son of God, eternally begotten of the Father, God from God, light from light, true God from true God, begotten not made, of one being with the Father.
You're a Christian.
You say that. I haven't claimed that.
Either you're a Christian or you're not. Which one is it?
I could be either of them, but I don't have to tell you.
You yourself are a Christian, right?
That's, people debate about that, and I generally don't discuss it publicly.
I don't hide it. I don't think that Jordan Peterson is a Christian. I think that, you know, Christ told us what it means. Christianity is not an ethical system. Christianity is not a bunch of things, rules that you follow. It's not a prioritization of morality. It's actually first and foremost a form of relationship with God. It's a form of worship, and it includes certain things. There are certain things that Christ said that we need to be Christian. One is to be baptized, and all of those things, and to enter into the body, to participate in the body, and that has a real element to it. And so that's why I say, and I mean, Jordan might disagree with me, because Jordan might think he's a Christian and that it's something private and moral that he keeps in himself. But I don't see that as reflected in what we see in Scripture. And we know we have people who were willing to to die, you know, in order to not deny that they were Christians, in order to not deny Christ. That the professing of your faith, professing of your allegiance to Christ is an important aspect of Christianity. And so someone who doesn't do that, but then also thinks that he could be like secretly a Christian, or that it's probably better to be secretly a Christian because that way people will know you by your fruits. I think maybe that's what Jordan thinks. He hopes that people will know him by his fruits.
So what do you classify yourself as? Like, if Jesus came down right now, would you be his son? Or would you be somebody who's studying Jesus? Like, where does your heart lie right now? Who is your God?
I'd rather let other people decide.
Yeah, I mean,
I'd rather let other people. I'm public, painfully public, and so people can draw their own conclusions. I'm useful not being in a category, as it turns out. So
why though?
For the same reason that the frog in The Frog Prince is the one that brings the golden ball to the surface. A frog lives on land and in the water, right? He's a border dweller. Well, that's my position. I'm a border dweller. That's a psychopomp. A psychopomp is a what? It's a messenger of the gods. That's a hell of a thing to say. But I'm trying to aid people in their understanding of these deep traditions. And to do that, I have to straddle worlds. And so I'm unwilling to give up that position because it seems useful.
I found you so interesting as a sort of young white man, that sort of cliched thing. And I think that you just speak to so many people these days who feel nihilistic, who, as I said earlier, don't have meaning or don't feel that they have purpose in their lives. And you must know that you have spoken to millions of people and changed many, many people's lives. And I do want to talk about this phenomenon, and you are a phenomenon, if I may say, because I want to ask whether you feel that there's a danger in that there's a danger that people listen to you.
Yes, there's a terrible danger. There's terrible danger.
Well, absolutely, because the point is people might...
All sorts of terrible danger. Many of them.
Let me describe one of them.
Sure.
People may listen to you. You know, these are young people forming their opinions about the world. They may listen to you uncritically, and they may view you as a sort of idol. So do you worry that there may become a sort of Jordan Peterson cult, as it were?
I can't say that I've had that as a specific worry, because I would have to really participate in that for it to really happen, and I don't want that to happen, and I know why I don't want it to happen, and I've known for a long time. I read this paper by Carl Jung years ago called The Relations between the ego and the unconscious, and he talked about exactly this phenomenon, and he wrote extremely lucidly and carefully about the danger of over-identifying with, let's say, religious ideas. So people come and listen to me lecture, and so then the question is, well, who are they listening to? Well, in some sense, they're listening to me because there I am. But in some sense, they're not. I am the embodiment of a set of ideas, just as we all are. We're all embodiments of sets of ideas, and those ideas aren't mine. They're the collective ideas of the human race in some sense, and to the degree that I can articulate them properly for this time and place, to the degree that I can be wise in my generation, a biblical phrase, a very astute biblical phrase, then I can communicate those ideas to myself and to other people, but I don't want to be mistaken for their source. I'm not their source, and I'm very aware of that, and I do what I can to make that clear to myself, and my family helps me out with that a lot. They understand the danger as well.
Just getting back onto this issue of you sort of almost being a prophet in a way, do you view yourself as that? I mean, as religion declines, you go on this world tour, millions of people read your books, billions of people probably watching the videos online. Do you see yourself as a sort of new religious phenomenon for people?
Not new. And I see myself as fortunate That's how I see myself, that I have the opportunity to do this.
But are you a prophet?
And, see, to say yes or no, I have to think about how how I might be conceptualized, how what I'm doing might be conceptualized. No, I think I see myself as a psychologist, and fundamentally, I am a psychologist. I'm a behavioral psychologist, and I got very interested in psychoanalytic thinking, especially the Jungian variants, and I'm a professor, and I'm doing that, on a much larger stage, let's say. But that's really what I'm doing, and so it's a combination of those two things. And I speak about religious matters, but I don't see myself as a religious leader. I don't want to make that, although I speak about those things.
Are you worried that could happen? That you could become a kind of, a sort of pseudo-religious figure to people?
In the early church, you'd have been condemned as a heretic.
Yeah.
So when a modern Catholic says to you, Jordan Peterson, are you a Christian? What do you think about Catholicism? I think that the reason that they're interested is because if it's true what I'm saying, then they would have to say, I suppose, at least according to my understanding of Catholicism,
that's a form of Gnosticism.
I can't count you among my number.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably why people are interested. And I wonder if you agree.
What would you say? That would constitute a genuine form of inquiry, for sure.
I was Jordan Peterson's strongest supporter. Now I think he's dangerous. Several years ago, Jordan Peterson told me he wanted to buy a church. This was long before he became known as the most influential public intellectual in the Western world, as he was described in the pages of the New York Times a few months ago. It was before he was fancied to be a truth-telling sage who inspired legions and the author of one of the best-selling books in the world this year. He was just my colleague and friend. I assumed that it was for a new home. There was a trend in Toronto of converting religious spaces, vacant because of their dwindling congregations, into stylish lofts. But he corrected me. He wanted to establish a church, he said, in which he would deliver sermons every Sunday